They stopped talking when she stepped through the airlock. Not gradually, not awkwardly, instantly. The corridor outside docking ring 7 had been filled with noise seconds earlier. Clicking mandibles, harmonic pulses, low-frequency growls translated through implants, but now the sounds collapsed into a thick, suffocating silence. Every head turned, every eye, every lens, every sensory organ designed by evolution across half the galaxy. All of them focused on one small, very human figure standing just inside the hatch. She swallowed. Don't freeze. Don't stare back. Walk. At 23 years old, Aria Solen had crossed 3 systems, passed 14 psychological evaluations, and signed a contract that explicitly stated fatal incidents were statistically probable. She had prepared herself for many things. Silence this heavy was not one of them. Her boots clicked softly against the metallic floor as she stepped forward, the sound far too loud in the stillness. The station's gravity felt slightly off, just enough to remind her she wasn't anywhere near Earth anymore. She adjusted the strap of her single duffel bag and kept walking. No escort, no welcoming committee, no friendly orientation officer. Just a corridor full of aliens staring like she had tracked blood across the floor. Stay calm, shoulders back, neutral face. Her training echoed in her head as she passed the first cluster of crew members. They parted without being asked, creating space around her in a widening circle, not aggressively, cautiously. That was worse. To her left stood a tall, segmented being whose chitin reflected the overhead lights in shifting shades of deep blue. Its upper limbs folded tightly against its torso, a posture that, according to the cultural briefing, meant either respect or concern. Hard to tell which. To her right, a gelatinous life form suspended inside a transparent mobility field pulsed faintly, its inner light dimming as she passed. The translation implant at the base of her skull picked up a whisper of low-band communication. Confirmed. Human. Alone. Why would they send one? Aria kept her eyes forward. She had expected curiosity, maybe even amusement. What she felt instead was calculation. At the end of the corridor, a large viewing port revealed the black curve of space beyond the station. Stars burned sharp and distant, unblinking. For a brief second, she focused on them, grounding herself. You wanted this. You signed up for this. The Kheled Outpost wasn't just another station. It sat on the border between 6 non-human territories, a neutral ground where species that barely trusted each other maintained an uneasy cooperation. Trade, diplomacy, research, and things no official document ever described out loud. Humans had only recently been admitted. One representative, one observer, one experiment. Her. She reached the central hub and finally saw someone moving toward her with clear intent. Tall, broad, four-armed. The being's skin carried a matte, stone-like texture broken by thin lines of dim orange light running beneath the surface like slow lava. Its eyes, 2 primary, 2 smaller secondary, studied her without blinking. Authority radiated from it. Good. Finally. Aria stopped at a respectful distance, straightened slightly, and waited. The alien stopped in front of her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then her implant clicked softly as it synchronized with the station's translation network. When the being finally spoke, its voice arrived in her mind as a low, controlled tone. Human Aria Solen. Not a question. She nodded once. Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. One of its upper hands made a small motion, subtle but deliberate, activating a private channel, she realized. The background murmur of the station dimmed in her hearing. "You arrived without escort," it said. "The transport captain said I should report directly," Aria replied. "So I did." Silence again. The alien's gaze moved briefly to her single bag, then back to her face. "No security detail," it observed. "No. No support staff. No." A faint ripple passed beneath its stone-like skin. If she hadn't studied alien micro-expressions for months, she would have missed it. Surprise! "Your command sent you alone," it said slowly. Aria met its eyes. "Yes." Another long look. Around them, the rest of the hub pretended not to watch while very obviously watching. Finally, the alien inclined its head a few degrees, formal acknowledgement. "I am Station Commander Tarev," it said. "You will follow me." Relief flickered through her. Structure, direction, something normal. She nodded once. Understood. They began walking. As they moved deeper into the station, the silence followed them. Conversations resumed only after they passed, rising in cautious, hushed tones that her implant barely caught. Too small. Fragile. Soft tissue. Why would they send one like that here? Aria kept her face neutral. Let them look. Let them assume. They reached a lift platform that hummed softly as it rose through the station's inner core. Through the transparent walls, she saw multiple levels stacked above and below. Labs, docking bays, communal zones, species-specific environments sealed behind energy fields. A whole civilization compressed into one structure. Commander Tarev stood opposite her, unmoving. After a minute, it spoke again. "You understand," it said, "that this station is not forgiving." "I read the briefings," Aria replied. "Briefings," Tarev repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, those." A faint vibration passed through the platform as it slowed near an upper command tier. The commander's 4 eyes fixed on her fully now. "Most who request transfer here," it said, "do so after decades of service, experience, reputation, proven resilience." The lift doors began to open. "You," Tarev finished, "have none of those. Not hostile, not mocking, just a statement." Aria stepped forward as the platform settled and met the commander's gaze one more time. "No," she said calmly, "I don't." A small pause. Then very quietly, "But you'll find out why they sent me." For the first time since she arrived, something shifted in the air between them. Not respect, not yet, but interest. And across Kheled Outpost, whispers were already beginning to spread about the lone human who had just walked in alone. Word spread fast on Kheled Outpost. It didn't move like human gossip. Loud, messy, emotional. Here it traveled in quiet data bursts, low-frequency signals, subtle posture shifts, and encrypted crew channels. By the time Aria followed Commander Tarev into the command tier, most of the station already knew 3 things. A human had arrived. She was alone. She was young. None of those inspired confidence. The command level was colder than the rest of the station, not in temperature. Environmental systems kept everything perfectly balanced, but in design. Smooth metallic surfaces, minimal decoration, clean sightlines. Everything built for efficiency and control and observation. As they walked down the central corridor, Aria felt it again, that subtle awareness of being watched. Cameras weren't obvious here. They were embedded in walls, in light panels, in the very architecture. Quiet, constant monitoring. Standard for a multi-species outpost. Still unsettling. Tarev stopped before a sealed doorway. It opened instantly at the commander's approach, revealing a circular chamber with a single table at its center. Several figures were already inside, waiting. Aria stepped in and immediately recognized the setup. Not a welcome meeting, an evaluation. 4 beings sat around the table, each representing a different species assigned to station command. She had studied their physiologies during transit, memorizing what little human intelligence had gathered. Now those data points became reality. To the left sat a tall avian-like being, feathers layered in muted silver and black, eyes sharp and unblinking. Its kind, the Valari, were known for precision thinking and almost obsessive pattern recognition. Next to it, partially submerged in a portable hydration field, floated a translucent aquatic entity whose internal structures glowed faintly. The Salathi, specialists in systems analysis and environmental control. Across the table sat something heavier, dense, armored. A broad-shouldered figure with thick plating and deep-set eyes that reflected light like polished stone. Korth, Security Command, and finally a thin, elongated being whose skin shimmered faintly with shifting color gradients. An Irie diplomat. Hard to read, almost impossible to predict. All of them looked at her. Aria stood straight and waited. Tarev moved to the head of the table. "This is Human Representative Aria Solen," the commander said without ceremony. "Transferred under interspecies exchange protocol." A pause. Then the Valari spoke first, its voice translating into a precise, almost surgical tone inside her mind. "She is young, direct, no attempt to soften it." "Yes," Tarev replied. The Korth security officer leaned forward slightly, heavy armor plates shifting with a low metallic sound. "And unaugmented." That one landed harder. Aria kept her expression neutral. She knew what they were seeing. No visible combat implants, no reinforced skeletal plating, no neural acceleration ports. Compared to most station personnel, she probably looked under-equipped. Soft. "I was not informed," the Salathi analyst said calmly, its internal glow pulsing once, "that the human delegation would send an observer without support infrastructure." "She has full authorization," Tarev answered, "and clearance." The IRI tilted its head slightly, colors shifting across its skin in slow waves. "Authorization and capability," it said softly, "are not always equivalent." Silence settled. This wasn't hostility for the sake of it. It was risk assessment. Aria understood that. Finally, Tarev looked at her. "You may speak?" All eyes turned again. She could feel the weight of their expectations, or lack of them. One wrong tone, and she'd confirm every doubt in the room. So she kept it simple. "I'm here to do the job assigned," she said. "Observe, assist where requested, and maintain liaison with human command." The Korth officer studied her. "You requested this posting?" "Yes." "Why?" Not why were you sent. Why did you choose this? Aria met its reflective gaze. "Because this station is where multiple species work together under pressure," she said. "If humans are going to be part of that future, someone has to start learning how it actually works." A faint shift moved around the table, not approval, but acknowledgement of a logical answer. The Valari leaned forward slightly. "You believe you can function effectively here," it said. "I wouldn't have requested transfer if I didn't." Another pause. Then the Iris spoke, voice soft, but carrying across the room. "Confidence without experience is statistically unreliable." Aria didn't react outwardly. She'd heard variations of that her entire life. "Then it's good I learned fast," she said. That earned the first real reaction, a subtle flicker of color across the Ira's skin that might have been amusement. Tarev raised one hand slightly, reclaiming control of the room. "There will be a practical evaluation," the commander said. "Standard protocol for all new senior personnel." Of course there would be. Aria nodded once. Understood? The Selathi's internal glow brightened a fraction. "Testing will begin immediately," it said. "We will start with systems navigation and emergency response mapping. The station is complex, meaning let's see how quickly the human gets lost." Tarev turned toward the exit. "Follow." Aria stepped back into the corridor with the commander, aware that the others were already watching through internal feeds. Evaluation had begun the moment she boarded the station. Now, it was simply official. They walked in silence for a while, moving through a section of the station where architecture subtly shifted every few corridors, gravity gradients adjusting, lighting tones changing to accommodate different species. Finally, Tarev spoke without looking at her. "You are being underestimated," the commander said, not unkind, just factual. "I noticed," Aria replied. A brief pause. "Does that concern you?" Tarev asked. She considered the question honestly. "No," she said. "It usually helps." For the first time, one of Tarev's secondary eyes shifted toward her, focusing more sharply. "Usually," the commander repeated. They stopped before a large sealed door marked with multi-species hazard symbols. Tarev placed one hand against the access panel. The door began to open with a deep, mechanical hum. "On this station," the commander said quietly, "mistakes are rarely survivable." The door finished opening. Beyond it lay a vast operations chamber filled with moving holographic displays, shifting tactical maps, and real-time data from across the outpost. Dozens of crew members worked at different stations, most of whom immediately looked up as the human entered. Evaluation, Aria realized, wasn't just happening in a private room anymore. Now it was public. Tarev stepped aside slightly, gesturing her forward. "Show us," the commander said, voice low but carrying, "how fast you learn." The operations chamber went quiet when she stepped in, not fully silent. Systems still hummed, data streams continued flowing across layered holographic displays, but attention shifted. Subtly, instantly. Every operator in the room knew what this was. The human's test. Aria felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. Dozens of glances. Different species, different sensory methods, thermal scans, motion tracking, chemical detection, but all focused on her, waiting. Commander Tarev didn't introduce her, didn't explain, just moved to the central command platform and gestured for her to stand beside it. "Station layout," Tarev said. A wide holographic projection expanded in front of them, filling the air with a three-dimensional model of Kheled Outpost, rotating slowly, layer upon layer of interconnected rings, vertical transit shafts, sealed environmental sectors, docking arrays. Complex was an understatement. Aria stepped closer. "Your task," Tarev continued, "is simple. You will be given emergency scenarios. You will respond with optimal routing and procedural decisions. Time will be measured." Of course it would. Across the chamber, a few operators subtly reoriented their stations so they could watch without appearing obvious. No one spoke. No one interfered. Just observation. Aria exhaled slowly once and focused on the map. She'd studied the station's schematics during transit, But static diagrams were nothing compared to this living system. Sections moving, access routes shifting, depending on species requirements, security zones updating in real time. A station designed by 6 civilizations rarely stayed simple. Scenario 1, the Salathi analyst's voice transmitted from somewhere in the room. Localized hull breach, Sector 12. Atmospheric loss spreading. 300 personnel in adjacent zones. A section of the hologram flashed red. Timer started. Aria didn't move immediately. She watched the spread pattern, how the simulated vacuum expanded through corridors, how emergency bulkheads responded. Most would start issuing commands instantly. She didn't. Instead, she looked for the pattern beneath the obvious. There, a structural choke point between 2 rings, designed for cargo flow, but currently half-sealed for maintenance. If bulkheads closed according to standard protocol, pressure would redirect and accelerate decompression toward a densely populated lab cluster. Standard response would make it worse. She reached into the hologram and manually rerouted 2 containment doors, then redirected evacuation paths away from the main transit corridors toward a maintenance shaft network rarely used by most species. Faster, less crowded, safer. "Recommendation submitted," she said calmly. The timer stopped. A small ripple moved through the chamber, operators checking her solution against predictive models. Data scrolling rapidly. One of the Volari made a sharp clicking sound. Surprise. Casualty projection reduced by 31%, the Salathi announced a moment later. Response time acceptable. Not praise, but not dismissal either. Scenario 2, Tarev said immediately. The hologram shifted. Power distribution failure, partial cascade through environmental stabilizers, mixed species habitat zones affected. Harder. If atmosphere, temperature, or gravity shifted too far in certain sectors, some species could lose consciousness, or worse, within minutes. Aria stepped closer to the display. This time she moved faster, tracking redundancies, identifying which systems could safely overload for short bursts without triggering full shutdown. Human stations use different priorities. Alien ones layered survival requirements in ways that weren't always intuitive, but patterns still existed. She rerouted power through 3 non-essential research arrays, temporarily blacking out 2 observation domes to stabilize environmental control for the most vulnerable species clusters. Stabilization window, 9 minutes, she said, enough to bring backup cores online manually. Pause. Data verification again. Functional, the Salathi confirmed. Inefficient by 2%, but within acceptable parameters. Aria almost smiled. 2% was nothing under pressure. Around the room, the atmosphere had shifted slightly. Still cautious, but no longer dismissive. She could feel it in the way operators watched now. Not just a curiosity, a variable. Tarev didn't react outwardly. "Final scenario," the commander said. The hologram flickered, and suddenly half the station went dark. Not simulation dark. Actual dark. Lights cut. Displays vanished. The low hum of systems stuttered into abrupt silence before emergency illumination snapped on in dim red strips along the walls. A few operators jerked upright. Others immediately began working their consoles. This wasn't part of the test. Aria knew it instantly. Somewhere deep in the station, something had just failed for real. A sharp tone echoed through the chamber as primary systems attempted to reboot and failed. Then a voice, tight, controlled, came over the command channel. "Commander, We have an unscheduled systems collapse across 3 sectors. Navigation grid is desynchronizing. Another voice cut in. Docking ring 2 just lost pressure stabilization. Environmental control lag detected in mixed habitat zones. The room erupted into motion. Real emergency. Tarev's posture changed subtly, authority locking into place. Status overview, the commander ordered. Cause unknown, the Salathi responded. Initial failure originated in central routing core, but the station lurched, not violently, but enough. A deep vibration rolled through the structure like distant thunder. Aria felt it through her boots. Felt the way several operators froze for a fraction too long, processing unexpected variables. And in that fraction, she saw something most of them hadn't yet. On the emergency side panel near the main holographic projector, a secondary schematic flickered briefly before stabilizing. Old system architecture, human-compatible. Her eyes narrowed. That's not a cascade failure. It was a bottleneck, a routing conflict spreading outward because automated systems from multiple species were trying to override each other at the same time. Too many safeguards, too many priorities, no unified control. The kind of problem that grew worse the longer everyone tried to fix it separately. Aria stepped forward. "Commander," she said sharply. Tarev's primary eyes snapped toward her immediately. "Speak." She pointed to the side schematic. "Your systems are fighting each other. Every species fail-safe is trying to take priority at once. You're locking your own recovery loop." A brief pause as the Salathi processed that. Analysis. Confirms escalating command conflicts. Tarev didn't hesitate. Solution. Aria moved to the auxiliary console. Her fingers hovered for only a second. "Give me temporary routing authority to the human-compatible layer," she said. "It's simpler. Fewer competing protocols. I can stabilize the core long enough for you to resequence properly." Silence hit. Every eye in the room turned, hand control of a failing multi-species station to the newest, least proven member present. Tarev studied her. 1 second, 2. Another vibration rolled through the station. Somewhere, an alarm began to rise. Decision point. Finally, the commander spoke. "Authorization," Tarev said. And just like that, control shifted to the human. Control did not feel dramatic. There was no surge of power, no cinematic shift. Just a small icon turning white on the console in front of Aria, confirming that temporary routing authority had transferred to her layer. Human-compatible systems, simple architecture, minimal redundancy, which was exactly why it might work. Behind her, the operations chamber moved with controlled urgency. Operators spoke across channels, cross-checking failures as they spread through the station. But now, for the first time since the collapse began, they weren't issuing competing override commands. They were waiting for her. Aria exhaled once and slid her hands across the console. "Freeze all automated priority escalation," she said. The Salathi hesitated only half a second before executing. "Confirmed. All non-essential override routines paused." "Good. Now isolate the central routing core from species-specific environmental protocols. Hard partition, not soft." "That will suspend adaptive habitat balancing," the Salathi warned. "For 90 seconds, Aria replied. "If we don't do it, you won't have a station left to balance." A pause. Then, executing. Across the chamber, several displays shifted as systems began separating from each other, something they normally avoided at all costs. Multi-species stations were built on integration, cooperation, interdependence. Right now that interdependence was killing them. Aria pulled up the simplified human layer schematic. Compared to the full station architecture, it looked almost primitive. Clean lines, direct pathways, fewer conditional loops. Perfect. Routing Core is receiving simultaneous recovery commands from 6 protocol trees, she said quickly. It's stuck in recursive confirmation. Nothing executes because everything needs approval from everything else. The Korth security officer stepped closer behind her, heavy presence like a wall. Then remove the approval requirement. That's what I'm doing. Her fingers moved faster now, bypassing layers designed for negotiation and consensus. Human emergency systems were built differently, sometimes brutally so. In critical failure scenarios, decision chains collapsed into single-thread authority. One command, one path, execute. Establishing temporary command spine, she said. Linear hierarchy, no cross-consultation. The Volari made a sharp sound. That architecture is dangerously inflexible. Yes, Aria said. That's why it works in a crisis. She initiated the override. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the station shuddered again, harder this time, as conflicting systems slammed into the new structure and tried to resist. Warning indicators flared across the console. Core instability rising, the Salathi reported. If this fails, it won't, Aria said quietly, eyes locked on the routing flow. She forced the new command spine deeper, stripping away redundant negotiations between systems. Environmental controls, navigation grids, docking stabilization, all of them rerouted through a single temporary authority chain. Simple, direct, decisive. The way human emergency networks were built after too many disasters caused by hesitation. Come on, she murmured under her breath. For one long stretching moment, the entire station seemed to hang between failure and recovery. Then the vibration stopped, not gradually, instantly. Displays across the operations chamber flickered back to stable output. Red alerts shifted to amber, then to controlled status indicators. Environmental readings normalized. Pressure loss in docking ring. 2 halted and began repressurization. Silence fell. Not the tense silence from before, a stunned one. The Salathi spoke first, voice quieter now. Central routing core, stabilized. Command conflicts resolved. The Volari leaned toward its console, scanning data streams. System coherence returning across all sectors. The Korth security officer straightened slowly behind her. Structural integrity holding. Aria didn't move yet. She kept watching the core flow, making small adjustments to prevent systems from immediately flooding back into chaotic overlap. Reintroducing species-specific protocols in sequence, she said, one at a time. Don't let them all reattach at once or we'll repeat the problem. Understood, the Salathi replied instantly. 30 seconds later, full stability locked in. The station lived. Only then did Aria lean back slightly from the console. The room remained quiet. Every operator staring, not at a curiosity anymore, at the person who had just kept the station from tearing itself apart. Commander Tarev stepped forward. For a moment, the massive 4-armed figure simply looked at the stabilized displays, then at Aria. Status, the commander said. Stable, she replied. You can transition control back to primary multi-species architecture, slowly. Recommend keeping a simplified emergency spine as fallback in case this happens again. Tarev studied her for several seconds, then, without looking away, spoke to the room. Transfer authority back to Central Command. The small white icon on Aria's console dimmed. Control returned to the station. Only now did she become fully aware of how many beings were watching her, not with doubt anymore, not with polite tolerance, with recalculation. The Irie diplomat's skin shifted in slow, thoughtful waves. The Valari's feathers had lifted slightly, a sign of heightened attention. Even the heavily armored Korth regarded her differently now, posture less dismissive. Tarev finally spoke again, voice carrying across the chamber. "You identified the failure source in under 40 seconds, the commander said, and implemented a stabilization architecture none of us considered." Aria shrugged faintly. "Your systems are designed for cooperation. Ours are designed for when cooperation breaks down." A subtle ripple passed through the room at that. Not disagreement, recognition. Tarev stepped closer, close enough that the faint lines of orange light beneath the commander's stone-like skin became visible. "When you arrived," Tarev said quietly, "this station assessed you as a potential liability. Honest, direct. Then, that assessment is being revised." Around them, operators returned to work, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations resumed in low tones, not about whether the human belonged here, but about what she might be capable of. Aria picked up her small duffel bag from where she'd left it near the entrance. "Is there anything else for the evaluation?" she asked calmly. For the first time, something like dry amusement touched Tarev's voice. "Yes," the commander said, "there is always something else." A pause, then more quietly, "Because whatever caused that failure," Tarev said, eyes shifting briefly toward the station's deeper systems, "was not an accident. They gathered in the command chamber less than 10 minutes later, not for ceremony, for containment. The station had stabilized, but tension lingered like static in the air. Operators across Kheled Outpost were running diagnostics, security teams sweeping critical sectors, analysts dissecting every millisecond of the failure. Because Commander Tarev had been right, it wasn't an accident. Aria stood near the central display while the senior staff assembled again. Valari, Salathi, Korth, Iri. This time, no one questioned why she was there. No one suggested she wait outside. She had earned a place in the room. The main hologram flickered to life, displaying a timeline of the system's collapse. Lines of data traced backward from the failure point in the routing core. The Salathi spoke first. Origin confirmed. External command injection through maintenance channel 17. Sabotage. The word didn't need to be spoken aloud. "Access point?" the Korth security officer asked. "Internal," the Salathi replied. "Whoever initiated the cascade was already inside station systems. Authorized clearance, partially masked." A low sound rumbled from the Korth's chest, unmistakably anger. The Ira's skin shifted through darker shades. "Someone on this station," it said softly, "attempted to trigger a multi-species systems conflict severe enough to cause catastrophic failure. Not just damage, collapse. Thousands lived on Kheled Outpost. A full cascade could have vented entire sections into space before recovery protocols aligned." Aria folded her arms lightly, studying the data. "They didn't want it to explode immediately," she said. 4 alien heads turned toward her. She stepped closer to the hologram and pointed to the failure progression. "See the delay patterns? The conflicts were designed to escalate slowly. Enough time for systems to lock each other out, but not enough for a coordinated response." The Valari leaned in, feathers lifting slightly. "You believe the intent was maximum systemic paralysis before detection?" "Yes." Tarev watched her carefully. "Why?" Aria met the commander's gaze. Because if the station goes down instantly, it's obvious sabotage. If it collapses slowly under its own protocols. She gestured lightly to the tangled data streams. It looks like structural incompatibility. Like this alliance doesn't work. Silence settled. The implications spread through the room with cold clarity. Someone wanted the multi-species cooperation here to fail. The Irie spoke quietly. Political destabilization. Or preparation, the Korth added. A disabled station is easier to take. Tarev remained still for several seconds, processing. Then the commander turned to Aria. You saw the pattern faster than our analysts, Tarev said. Why? She shrugged slightly. Humans have a long history of systems failing because too many groups design them together without unified control. We've studied collapse scenarios. A faint shift passed through the commander's posture. Not quite approval, respect. The Salathi adjusted internal glow levels thoughtfully. There is another variable, it said. Had the cascade continued for 3 additional minutes, recovery would have required a full core restart. Estimated survival probability for several habitat sectors, below 40%. Meaning, without intervention, hundreds would have died. No one said it aloud. Tarev finally moved, stepping to the center of the chamber. Authority settled over the room like gravity. This station remains operational because of the actions taken during the failure, the commander said. Specifically, the human, direct, public. Aria felt every eye shift to her again, but differently now. Not curiosity, not skepticism. Assessment had turned into recognition. The Valari inclined its head slightly, a precise, deliberate gesture. Your response speed and structural reasoning were effective, it said. From the Korth, a deeper acknowledgement. You held command under live instability without hesitation. The Erie's colors shifted into a calm, steady pattern. First impressions, it said softly, are not always accurate. Aria gave a small nod. Happens. Tarev studied her one moment longer, then spoke words that carried across the chamber and through the open command channels beyond. Human Representative Aria Solen, the commander said, voice steady. Your evaluation is complete. A pause. Then, you are no longer considered a provisional liability to this station. Another pause. Slight. Deliberate. You are now considered an operational asset. Around the operations level, the words spread quickly, not formally announced, but heard, understood, repeated through quiet internal channels. Asset. On Kheled Outpost, that word carried weight. Aria exhaled slowly, tension she hadn't fully noticed easing from her shoulders. Good, she said simply, because I didn't come all this way to sit on the sidelines. A faint, almost imperceptible shift touched Tarev's tone. Something close to dry humor. Yes, the commander said, that has become clear. The main hologram shifted again, now displaying a slow scan of the station's internal networks, searching for the source of the sabotage. Tarev looked at the data, then back at her. Whoever attempted this, the commander said quietly, is still here. Not a warning, an invitation. Around them, senior staff began coordinating the investigation, security sweeps, access tracebacks, diplomatic alerts carefully prepared, but not yet transmitted. The station was stable, for now. Aria picked up her duffel bag again and slung it over her shoulder. Commander, she said, where do you want me? Tarev held her gaze for a long second, then gestured toward the expanding investigation grid. At the center of it, the commander replied. Across Kheled Outpost, word continued to spread. The lone human who had arrived alone was no longer being watched with doubt. Now they were watching with expectation. And somewhere inside the station's vast layered structure, someone realized their carefully planned failure had just been stopped by the one person they had assumed would matter least.